Hey, good evening, everybody. It is 6:02 p.m. on the 17th of July, 2025. It has been a dog's age since our last planning board meeting, but this is, in fact, the regularly scheduled meeting of the planning board. I'm Mike Capuano. I'm the chairman of the planning board. With me tonight is our vice chair, Amelia Apoff, our clerk, Jahan Habib, our members, Lynn Richards, Michael McNeely, and Luke Schuster. We have a quorum. Pursuant to the Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, this meeting of the Planning Board is being conducted via remote participation. A video recording of the proceedings will be available on the city's website's meetings and events page or by emailing planningboard@somervillema.gov. This meeting is being recorded. So we have a number of items on our agenda. Um, the only case that we have per se has previously been opened and heard and discussed, so we don't need to open that. So I'm just going to start with meeting minutes. We've got May 1st, May 15th, and June 5th. Has everybody had a chance to review the May 1st draft meeting minutes? Does anybody have any suggested revisions? Yeah, Luke and John. Luke first.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I have a small edit, which is the first vote recorded. I think it's the first one in those minutes on the Dormer amendment. It says there was a unanimous 6-0 vote, and I voted present. So I think it should say 5-0 with one present.
Agreed.
Steve Carey
And-
here. I will be sure to make that note and have that corrected accordingly.
And Jahan, I saw you too.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Just two small items. One is Mayor Ballantyne's name. There may be a slight misspelling there. So if Steve wouldn't mind correcting the spelling, and then I just this is just a small point on page one. I guess this would be the third paragraph, the paragraph that starts with the board discuss ways to support greater density in areas without as many hoops to jump through. The section that says without as many hoops to jump through, I'm wondering if we could come up with a different wording, less administratively burdensome or something to that effect. That's just my recommendation there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I could be in support of that, but I love hoop, man. But now let's make that a little more professional.
Sure, I can make that change as well.
Thank you.
Anybody else for May 1? Okay. Seeing none, the chair moves to adopt as amended the minutes of May 1, seconded by Amelia. Steve, can we have a roll call?
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Lynn Richards,
Aye.
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Amelia Aboff,
Aye.
and Michael Capuano.
All right, we have minutes. Up next, May 15th. Anybody have any suggested revisions? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to move to adopt the draft meeting minutes of the 15th. Second by Amelia. Steve?
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Lynn Richards,
Aye.
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Amelia Aboff,
Aye.
and Michael Capuano.
June 5. Anybody have any suggested revisions? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move to adopt the draft meeting minutes as the final meeting minutes of the planning board, seconded by Amelia. Roll call, please.
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Lynn Richards,
Aye.
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Amelia Aboff,
Aye.
and Michael Capuano.
Aye. Okay, we have our minutes squared away. The next thing I'm going to bring up is the only case that we've got is 483 Broadway, which does have two separate applications, two separate item numbers. So if we could please have the applicant and their team be unmuted and shared and whatnot. As a reminder for everybody, this case has been opened, a presentation has been made, discussion by and among the planning board, and the applicant and staff has been conducted a little while ago. We kept the written comment period open until I think it was last week. And so think all of the discussion the planning board has had, I think mostly has been addressed. Unless there are new things that we think need to be raised or a continuation of anything that people had concerns about with this particular application. I saw a hand and then things moved around. Tavis, yes. If you want to, as a reminder, introduce yourself and your affiliation or address to the record.
Sure. My name is Tavis Babbitt. I'm representing the owner, John Wood. My address is 85 McGurty Road in Eastham, Massachusetts. And I've been working with John on getting this project approved through the zoning board and now with you guys here. So I just wanted to quickly address some of the concerns that Luke had last time. He mentioned some bike parking spaces and maybe looking at another alternative for the bike path and loading and unloading. So I didn't know if this was the right time to do that or
It would be.
all right, good. So just to, if I could share my screen, I'll show you what I noticed from a previous plan that we submitted. Let's see here. This
This
was
is
the
Steve
plan that,
Carey. Tavis, I just promoted you, so you should now be able
Yep.
to share.
I got it. Yeah, thank you. So this was the plan that we submitted previously. And what I noticed is that this particular location of where the sidewalk is not accurate with what's actually happening next door. So I've adjusted the plans to reflect that just so you can kind of see, and I'll show you the top of the satellite image so you can see that real quick here. So this is what's actually there. So we see there's a jog sort of here along the road. It moves over in front of Broadway. And so this is the existing bike lane as we have it. And as you can see, every other parking space has this 3-foot gap between the bike lane and the parking area, which makes sense for door swings and things like that. So that was what led us to our original design here of keeping, the bike lane where it is and just leaving that 3-foot buffer like the rest of the street has along there and keeping it in line. And just as a reminder, the loading and unloading is really one day a week on Tuesdays. And so John, the owner, mentioned that there's 4 deliveries typically on Tuesday. And that's why we came up with this plan, because it's really just foot traffic that you have to keep an eye out for bikes and things coming in and out. And we did in this particular plan, and all the others actually, we added some bike stations here. And so what those would look like would be this kind of a design here. A single pole that you could put 2 bikes on. And so I have proposed 3 there on our design here. So you could actually accommodate up to 6 bikes at one time. And so this is the original plan that we had. Now, I explored a couple of alternatives. The second alternative is to actually switch the parking tight to the sidewalk. And as you can see, that does create some unusual bend in the bike lane. And to me, that seems less safe because the cars have to cross the bike lane to park. And that to me seemed like less of a ideal situation. But it is easier for the unloading and loading of goods. But again, that's one day a week. So is it really worth it to have that crossing the bike lane and have that bend in the bike lane to achieve that? And the last option I did propose was this one here. And none of these other alternatives have been through mobility, but this one here is something that would basically mean backing the truck into Strathmore. And so there would be no entering and exiting the truck from the Somerville side or from Broadway. That would just be from the back and into the building along the side where the entrance would be for the supplies. So there are advantages to this. However, having feedback from the neighbors, they didn't really want the owner taking up possible parking for residents on Strathmore. So this one would obviously be something contrary to what we had proposed previously. However, it is the most convenient, certainly for deliveries. But again, it's not a very often scenario that we'd be using that spot. So those are the things that we worked on based on our last discussion. So happy to take questions. And
Yes, thanks. I see Sarah White is here and
Hi, Sarah.
might have some thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. I appreciate the work that Travis has done in the intervening weeks to work on some solutions to questions that were brought up by Member Schuster. However, to Travis's point, I haven't seen these. These haven't been uploaded to CitizenServe and they haven't been reviewed by Mobility. The bike lane that is there exists as it is and is under the auspices of the city, and it was determined by the city to be put there. So I would be I would not be comfortable. If the board wanted to proceed this way, I would feel more comfortable if Mobility looked at these options beforehand, including the location of some new proposed bike parking. Mobility had reviewed the plans that were put before you for consideration last time, and they were comfortable with those plans. So if there is something that the planning board does have a question about, I would be happy to bring that back to Mobility for them to look at. But seeing this for the first time tonight is would make me a little bit uncomfortable moving forward with these changes in plans until Mobility had looked at it.
I appreciate
Mr.
that,
Chairman.
Sarah. My concern, so one, I share your issue with moving the existing bike lane. That's going to be, I think, not the best idea, or one that I'm sure we can actually do. I know that we were on a little bit of a time schedule and time consideration for this applicant based on the transfer of their license. And I just want to make sure that if we ask for Mobility to review some of these proposed changes, if it's not going to impact the viability of this business to be able to use the license that's in the process of being transferred.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I'm not sure if that's for me or for Mr. Babbitt, but I would not be able to provide you with an answer to that question. But Tavis, do you have some thoughts on that?
yeah, I do think that we are up against the time frame on that. And we were actually hoping that last month and it would be a decision month, but now that we're here, I mean, I only propose those as an alternative to see the drawbacks of the alternate options that we had available, not necessarily as a proposed plan per se. I do think that the original plan that we developed that was approved by Mobility is the best layout. And so these were more or less in a contrast to what might be otherwise possible, but not ideal. And so that was really the purpose of these, to rule them out in a sense. And so I think the bike parking is really what we were focusing in on for this particular plan. But I did want to present to you all the options that I saw were somehow feasible, but not necessarily better in any way or ideal. So.
I appreciate that. Michael.
Yeah, so first off, I'll take the blame for all this kerfuffle instead of Member Schuster. So first is really appreciate you going through all the effort to look at the different ways that you could be interacting with the bike lane. And I apologize if I gave the impression that like we need to find a new reroute scenario. I think what I meant to ask was if there's something we could do to discourage unloading to occur outside of the path that you drew, right? Basically, if you have that half length truck and you pulled it all the way up to the front instead of leaving it at the back, there's room, for error to just decide to cross an area that perhaps could have more interactions with the bike lanes. But I think at the end of the day, I generally agree that you shouldn't be slowing up the application for this particular concern. So I don't want to put too much weight on that. On the bike parking scenario, would love to kind of hear a little bit more from Sarah on if we think that by installing more bike parking, we would need to go through a formal review process with mobility, or if you think this is something that would be minor enough that this is something that the applicant could provide and then not necessarily have to go through that review process again. Because I feel like bike parking is nothing but a good thing, generally speaking.
Sure,
Michael,
Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, go ahead.
We can also condition this application to ensure that, you know, it's not going to be finally permitted until and unless mobility has an opportunity to review. And if they have an issue, then it won't meet the condition. Because generally, as you know, they did sign off on the previous iteration. And I think what you just said is, you know, more is better. I would be surprised if they disagreed with that sentiment. If they did, I don't want to preclude this applicant from being able to move forward for something that I think is a little bit minor.
Yep, I'm there too.
Sorry.
Oh, no, Mr. Chairman, through you, you said it better than I did, so I think you're probably all set.
Okay. Anybody else want to ask anything, discuss anything before we move forward with these fine people? Okay. Okay, seeing none, we have two votes. One is for the site plan approval. So following public testimony, review of the submitted materials, and deliberation of the required considerations outlined by the ordinance, I move to approve with the conditions we discussed. The site plan approval to develop a commercial building in the mid-rise 4 district with the recommended conditions from the staff memo dated May 27th, 2025. Seconded by Amelia. Steve, can you call the roll?
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Lynn Richards,
Aye.
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Amelia Aba,
Aye.
and Michael Capuano.
Aye. Okay, this is for the use special permit following public testimony, review of the submitted materials, and deliberation of the considerations and findings outlined by the ordinance. I move to approve with the conditions described in the staff memo dated May 27th, 2025. The request to establish an alcohol sales use in the MR4 zoning district, seconded by Amelia. Steve, please.
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Lynn Richards,
Aye.
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Amelia Aba,
Aye.
and Michael Capuano.
Aye. Good luck.
Thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your night.
You too.
Okay, next on the agenda is the Assembly Square Neighborhood Plan. We have had substantive presentation, substantive discussion. I think we may have some revisions that staff is going to go over with us before we move forward.
This is Steve Carey. I just promoted Sarah Lewis to panel, so she should be joining shortly.
Why did she have to be promoted? She should have walked in as running the show, man.
Good evening, all, and thank you once again for your continued support. Steve, do I have permission to share screen? I'm sure I do.
I just made you a co-host. So
I
believe
do.
you can.
Okay, there we go. All right, hopefully you can see the presentation. All right, excellent. So we had heard a number of comments from you over, you know, sort of a few meetings. So those had basically been consolidated into, if I can figure out how to advance, there we go, into a couple of different categories. And so, sort of the connectivity, the program, infrastructure, and sustainability were sort of the general broad brushes. So I'd like to go through and talk about the connectivity and program first. And that goes into some detail with questions about connections to other neighborhoods, some of the shadows, and as well as the housing types and some of the economic development flexibility. So I'm going to start with the connections. So one of the questions was regarding an elevated bike path. I confirmed with mobility that is a path in the bike network plan that is shown along Foss Park, and the intention is to continue that along Fells Way. That will be a sidewalk level, so it's not elevated as in bridge, but a sidewalk level bike path, and that is shown on the proposed bike network path plan on that diagram. The other connection that was of concern, and it was very hard to actually pull things out and diagram this for you. So what you see mostly on this illustration is the connections that are intended across Fells Way to engage the Ten Hills neighborhood. So what you see most visibly on this illustration is the green, the bike path connections, but those always have sidewalks and crosswalks adjacent to them. Now, the one thing that I will need to caution as we think about this is, of course, Fells Way is a state highway, so it is not fully under the city's control, but they do work with us very, very closely. The other piece, you'll notice the middle intersection. Hopefully you can see my pointer. That is the realignment of how Middlesex is intended to come into Fells Way. Whether that will be a lighted intersection is yet to be determined. So how safe a crossing point there will be is still sort of, that's in the future, but this is our intent. And as I said, MassDOT usually does work with us on a lot of these issues. Also from Ten Hills, there was a question asked about shadows. So the diagrams that you see here were from the 20 to 30 Cummings Street proposal that was recently approved as the master plan. And these show the shadows from that tallest building, and that building was permitted as a maximum height of 290 feet. So when you have a building that tall, and it is the tallest one that will be closest to Ten Hills, and so apparently that will cast a shadow of about 1,000 feet on December 21st. And so that's the longest length it will be, as you can see here. So it doesn't affect, it's sort of like the first couple of blocks of the neighborhood are affected at different degrees during the year. So the sort of the northern easternmost area won't be affected at all. But that was sort of the easiest way to sort of to show that. All right, and I apologize. I'm getting over a silly head cold, so I keep clearing my throat. I'm sure it's quite annoying. So I apologize for that. We'd also talked a lot about a parking model for the area. We don't have one at the moment. However, as we did the fiscal analysis, there was a lot of assumptions that had to be made about the program. And that sort of gets to the distribution of commercial to residential. And so we can probably use some of this basis tied in with what you see to the upper right is the tracking chart that has been submitted with each block of the FRIT project. So combining these two things that has the existing data with the potential projection of what the development could be, we may be able to develop a parking model. I have not dug into this in detail with mobility at this point in time, but it is one of the elements that we'll be looking at as we move forward, before any of the new sites come up for before you for redevelopment. One of the interesting facts as I was doing research on this is the original PUD actually approved 10,000 parking spaces, of which only a little over half of those have been actually constructed. So even with the original approval and under the PUD, we're at least moving in the better direction of, and keep in mind, that was also approved way before an Orange Line station came online. So there's been a lot of influence and a lot of changes. The housing did some quick math. So the fiscal analysis showed a number of 2,900 potential new units in the plan as illustrated. And so from that number, without going into the units that are already in Federal Realty moving forward, that will have to meet the 20% requirement. And one of the questions about the unit sizes was also brought up. And, we're imagining that the zoning here, when it gets redone, is going to be commensurate with the rest of the city. So that would be approximately 116 of those units. And that's just in the new units potential that would have 3 or more bedrooms. And as I said, that makes it parallel with the rest of the city. Obviously, with the other programs that were in the fiscal analysis, the housing unit count would go up with the residential emphasis scheme, and that could be up to about 5,700 new units. So, sort of those numbers would be the original approval. I did not get a breakdown of the existing affordable units in the existing PUD, but that was approved for 1,845 residential units, and those have all been constructed or permitted. So the last one to be permitted, the residential building, was Block 9, the 375 Harold Cohen Way, that we just looked at a little while ago. Regarding the economics and the program flexibility, I wanted to show you what we had looked at, and these are diagrams from the fiscal analysis. So you can see the illustrative, what's called the city plan in the fiscal analysis is the intended, and that's about 60% commercial and 40% residential on the Marketplace and Assembly South. The predominantly residential program that I mentioned that could get us up to 5,700 new units is obviously replaces some of that commercial with residential uses, and that flips it to be about 60% residential and 40% commercial. So as we get through and look at the new zoning, what those either percentages or how we outline that detail in the zoning is going to be less specified than what we show in the neighborhood plan, because it's intended as a vision. And we want that flexibility so that if the market demands that a particular block flip one way or the other, we can look at that. What we will look at in the zoning is how we then divide sub areas in this site, if necessary, to make sure that we can get that proportional balance and keep, sort of the 24-hour community and not be a, sort of too much of an office park, to make sure that we can still have a complete neighborhood. There were a lot of citations and references throughout the document, some of which that you had highlighted, such as the lead version. And so we went through that with a fine-tooth comb and did update some of formatting issues and some of the and the demographics. What was interesting is, as it was pointed out, that some of the demographics might have changed. So I worked with economic development to understand what these numbers were. And whereas we had the information from pre-COVID, when this project had originally started, and then there was only a 3% work from home. Now, post-COVID, that number is up to about 29% of remote work. And I thought that was quite a, sort of, we all know anecdotally that has changed, but seeing those numbers sort of stunned me a little bit that it was that big a jump. Then the next piece is the infrastructure and sustainability aspects that you talked about. I did talk to clarified with engineering the DEP regulations concern. So as you can see, the little box that said it's not allowed. That text box has been removed. Infiltration is allowed. However, it is extremely limited due to the previous use of the site as an industrial use and sort of largely automotive. So it's more about limiting and carefully monitoring what infiltration does actually happen on the site. Along with that, sort of, we talked about the question about sea level rise was brought up. There is a assembly, obviously, is prime with its location on the river for being a victim of sea level rise. You can find the current data on the Somerville Climate Change Vulnerability Assessment. OSE, I talked to them, and they are going to be changing their sustainable and resilient questionnaire that all applicants have to fill out to make sure that they are aware and bring closer attention to the importance of this issue, especially in this area. So that's not necessarily part of the neighborhood plan, but it's something that they will be working on looking forward. I actually fell down a rabbit hole a little bit on this one and started reading all about the Amelia Earhart Dam and what sea level rise might do to the dam as well. We also, you had suggested talking about microgrids. So I went back and looked at the document to make sure it's closely coordinated with the updated climate forward that has come out since we've been working on this neighborhood plan. There is a lot of mention. There's direct reference in the climate forward. So I've made sure that we've got references to these different areas, different possibilities within the neighborhood plan itself. So while we don't go into specifics in the neighborhood plan, it is referenced and brought up a number of times. And there's a lot of referencing to climate forward to make sure that the plan, it does tie back to that. And then I think the final piece we have was we talked about district energy. So there was added a paragraph about district energy specifically into the neighborhood plan. The other piece that I wanted to point out is that OSE has been working with consultant Bureau Happold to study the potential of geothermal in different areas of the city, as well as, sort of the district energy concepts. And as part of that work, they, of course, are looking at what it takes to upgrade the city's electrification, basically, to support all the goals that we do have in climate forward. And that's available also on the OSE, on the Sustainaville website. So there's a lot out there that's going on sort of simultaneously, but we have been adding to, obviously, to the neighborhood plan as we go along. So, and with that, I believe that was all of your questions. If there are more, I am gladly here to answer them.
Thank you very much for the really thoughtful and kind of in-depth explanation. At some point, not tonight, I'm going to want to talk to you about how to read that climate chart that you showed us.
Okay.
Just because I have an idea of what I'm looking at, but I'm just kind of curious as to what it all means and where we go. So no, I very much appreciate you taking the time over the last couple of weeks to create the presentation, to go through a lot of the questions and thoughts that we had. Does anybody did we have anything that we'd like to raise between ourselves or with Sarah while we've got her? Yeah, Amelia.
Just a thank you. I know that I was sort of pounding on the updates to some of the sections, including the demographics, and I really appreciate that. I think it did uncover some interesting updated trends. So I really appreciate you taking the time to look into that, which I know is probably a more paperwork intensive ask.
I have a question that you probably can't answer. Are we considering as a city, is one of the renderings that you had, one of the graphics that you had, about some of those demographic changes and how the layout of the remainder of the build could go, is to make it 60% residential and 40% commercial with a new school. Is that something that the city's looking at? Because we do have a need for upgraded school facilities.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for putting me on the spot.
No, sorry. Never mind. Withdrawn.
No, that is actually of we did run that scenario in the fiscal analysis, because what happens is if you increase the residential, obviously the need for a new school does apply, but whether that would occur in assembly or not is unknown. So from the fiscal analysis perspective, we made the assumption, just to be cautious and sort of to run the worst case scenario. So by the time you take that land off the tax rolls as potential new development and the expense it would be to build a school, that is the scenario that we call the one that breaks the city. What that means is it doesn't actually break the city. It means that the new development alone cannot cover that additional cost and that loss of revenue from no development on those particular parcels that would need to be the school.
I gotcha. I mean, in a perfect universe, if we truly wanted to make Assembly a full-blown and comprehensive neighborhood, it would have the grocery store, the residential area, the green and open space, the fire station, and a school. So I liked the idea, but if the numbers aren't going to work, that's also good to know.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things when we're talking about schools, sort of it's hard to look at one neighborhood area because it's going to have such a, it's going to be a citywide draw, and whether,
Right.
and whether that's, like I said, whether that's the right location, that would be, sort of up to people beyond me.
No, I appreciate that. I thought that was just a very interesting idea because that is something that I was thinking about at various points as we were building out Assembly Square and trying to make it a comprehensive new neighborhood. So I appreciate the response. I do. Who else? Nobody else. Oh my. Okay. Are we at the point now? So Sarah and I guess Steve, I think the appropriate step that we take next is vote to adopt the plan. Is that appropriate? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. With no other comments or questions from members of the planning board, I want to thank you and everyone at PPC for putting together such a wonderful neighborhood plan. This is something obviously that we've been waiting for and hoping for a while. I'm glad we're at this point where we can move forward. So with that in mind, I move to adopt the Assembly Square neighborhood plan, seconded by Amelia. Steve, can I have a roll call, please?
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Lynn Richards,
Aye.
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Amelia Aboff,
Aye.
and Michael Capuano.
Aye. Awesome. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you all very much.
Last item that we have, and of course I lost it, is a modification to the rules of policy and procedure to allow city staff to do a couple more things as de minimis minor amendments. So, oh, hey, Dan.
Yeah, so we've got
No.
Dan Bartman here. Yeah, Dan, if you want to take it away. Oh, Dan, you're muted.
Thanks for having me, Mr. Chair, and through you to the rest of the board. It's good to be here. Steve will handle the specifics related to the actual text that we have in front of you tonight. We sent us an update before the meeting, but I'm kind of here to instigate future conversation and interaction as another project unfolds over the next couple months. In the budget that was approved for our department for this fiscal year, we do have two projects that Emily will be starting in this quarter. Whether or not they take a couple months is probably likely. But those are to review the zoning ordinance for potential update as it relates to the permits that are required in the ordinance, the procedural steps to acquire one of those permits, and then also the dimensional standards in the code. We adopted the zoning ordinance in December of 2019, and it's now been about 5 years of permitting, which is a perfect opportunity to take a step back and look how things have gone and make an assessment of if that's how we want to keep moving things forward. The reason I'm here bringing that up tonight is that minor site plan approval is one of the tools that the city council provided to the boards to address items that are inconsequential, development activity that is inconsequential and not deserving of all of the requirements of full site plan approval or a full special permit or a variance. As it was devised in the ordinance when it was adopted in 2019. The methodology that they took was to require site plan approval for everything that is considered development, and development is either new construction or whatever falls within the word modification. So real quickly, I wanted to at least read the definition of modification, which covers the alteration, expansion, reconstruction, extension, or structural change to the exterior of an existing structure, or interior construction that changes the number of dwelling units or the ground story commercial spaces within an existing structure. And that pretty much covers almost everything. There are some existing items related to building modification of a building that are already in your rules that allow minor site plan approval. For instance, the modification of a single storefront is included in that. The inclusion of a building component related to ground floor commercial spaces that's not a storefront is also included in those. The addition of screening around rooftop mechanicals or only adding rooftop mechanicals, that is all considered minor site plan approval and is handled administratively. Every time we encounter one of these unique situations, it provides us an opportunity to take a step back and ask about how the requirement that everything go through site plan approval is working or not. And I think this is one of those opportunities. We continue to get small stuff that happens to trigger this very broad definition. So one of the items that we have in front of you tonight is just a slight alteration of the text related to the change in the number of ground story commercial spaces. We're proposing to add text that would address that the increase in the number of ground story commercial spaces could be minor site plan approval. And that's because the reason that this text was added to the definition of modification in the first place was concern that buildings with multiple commercial spaces could reduce that down to less, not really the increase in the number of commercial spaces. So that was added with the amendment that altered the small business overlay district to require multiple ground story commercial spaces when the building was of a certain width. And that was to get more than one. So this language would create a situation where if you're providing more than one and it's compliant, that you don't have to go through the whole permitting process, mainly because that's interior work, not exterior, and achieving the goal of the small business overlay district, even if it's not in that overlay district. So increasing the number of commercial spaces is looked at as a beneficial thing for everybody involved. The text that we had revised before was related to a existing Somerville business trying to expand into an existing commercial space that was next door. So we did refine that text a little bit, the one right above. Steve also brought a plan set for a project that has all of us questioning the fact that it triggers the definition of a modification. And that's a project that adds a small sunroom to the back of a building that is in the MR district. So why I came tonight was to instigate conversation amongst the board for Emily's project as it unfolds over the next coming weeks and months, for you all to discuss as part of the input of that project, whether or not we should potentially make a matrix of what requires site plan approval, what type of development activity requires site plan approval, the extent of changes to an existing building, versus the version that we have now. And the reason I'm suggesting that is many zoning ordinances have a table that tells you that different permitting is required for different amounts of development activity, and that small things don't need all of the steps involved. We chose not to do that in the very beginning when we adopted the zoning overhaul because it was a complete regulatory change, and we wanted to make sure that we provided review of everything while we learned the types of activity that might not require full site plan approval. So like I said, every one of these situations that arises kind of makes us ask the question, maybe we should change the zoning ordinance rather than just continuing to expand the list of minor site plan approvals. The value of changing the zoning is that that is the most transparent place where all of the regulations exist, and the most forthcoming in telling people what permits are required and what are not. Your rules and regulations are a secondary document, and you are empowered by the zoning ordinance and the city council to make things minor site plan approval. But it's a second document that frequently goes unnoticed by the public. And so if we find ourselves continuing to add items to this list, to me, that's a signal that maybe we actually should rework on a zoning amendment to provide further guidance on what development activity requires site plan approval and what should be allowed through in some manner, but that threshold should be spelled out in the zoning so that it is clear and apparent to everybody up front. So I'm not here to not have you change your rules related to these two issues. We do think anything increasing the number of commercial spaces is a benefit rather than a detriment, and doesn't need all of the steps involved. But also that this plan set really shows an example of some amount of development activity that is also probably not deserving of having to go through the full process because its impact is so small. And I just want to, as a quick reminder, all of this is compliant with the zoning ordinance. So anything we're even talking about adding to the list of minor site plan approval would still have to be compliant. That wouldn't change even if we said site plan approval is not required. That's a process for issuing a permit. You could effectively decide some amount of development activity would be de facto by right and not require site plan approval in the MR zoning districts. So that, like I said, I'm here to try and instigate conversation amongst your board, and I do anticipate Emily coming to you all on a somewhat regular schedule to get feedback as her project unfolds. But I wanted to lay the groundwork for that engagement. She's out of the office until next week, and so we had this meeting and an opportunity to discuss this item. So I came tonight to share that all with you.
I appreciate that. Just to clarify for tonight, though, the proposed amendment to the rules and regs is to the interior space and layout of commercial units and not what you were just not presenting, but showing us related to a proposed sunroom.
Right. We've limited the language changes to your rules for tonight to just the related to the number of commercial spaces, and really are sharing that plan set related to the sunroom to get everybody talking together, because it's an example of something that is small like that.
I look forward to having that discussion when the time comes. And I like the idea of, every so often kind of reviewing and revisiting what we've drafted. How is it working? Is it working the way we intended? Are there things that we didn't intend that are occurring? And maybe we can avoid having a joint hearing every 30 seconds to try to correct it ad hoc, because I don't know about you guys, that drives me nuts. But for the proposal that's in front of us tonight, I think this seems to make sense. That is all internal, outside of maybe the addition of a door and signage. And it doesn't impact the way the street moves or the neighborhood or the neighbors are impacted. Although I do have a question, Dan, because in certain circumstances, when we do have parking requirements based on commercial space and the amount of commercial space, what would happen? Would it be impacted if one larger space that was subject to X number of parking spaces would be now divided up into two or three? What happens, or does it happen such that that would also impact some other requirements that the commercial space would have to meet?
Not any longer. If you remember, this past year we had the city council pass an amendment that repealed minimum parking requirements, and that part of that amendment also removed things from the code that were related to providing leniency for small businesses because they were like less than 5,000 square feet. That doesn't exist anymore because there's only parking maximums within transit areas. And that's still related to the amount of square footage, but a maximum. So you'd never run into a situation where you subdivided your space and now caused a parking minimum problem because they don't exist anymore.
Yeah, I guess I'm using parking as an example. But if there are other circumstances that would impact having multiple storefronts as opposed to just one, that was the one that kind of jumped out based on some concerns that happened from a project a few years ago. But are you confident that this won't impact other aspects of the ordinance and other requirements that would require some sort of a special permit or site plan approval?
That's correct. To my knowledge, yes. We mostly scrutinize when things get bigger and value when they're smaller. They tend to be more local businesses when there's a smaller storefront anyway. And so when either we have special permits for when a commercial use is larger than 10,000 square feet. And then also some scrutiny of formula businesses, but they all tend to be larger, not smaller.
That makes sense. Lynn, hi.
Thank you, Dan. I wanted to comment on your second part of your kind of presentation. So not the first part on these rules, but the second part about kind of the zoning code was passed in 2019, and now is an opportunity to kind of step back and to see how it's going. For the rest of the board, if you recall, Steve sent around a message a couple of weeks ago saying, hey, does anyone want to talk to this Tufts graduate student? And so I raised my hand because I love talking to students. And she told me this statistic that Luke has kind of hinted at a couple different times, but she has tracked the city of Somerville applicants from the time they put in an application to when they have final approval and they can go and do their project. And the average amount of time is 562 days. Which is really pretty shocking. When if you're in the developer shoes, every time, time is money. So we're increasing the amount of cost for doing the development. And all of this is to say, Dan, from my perspective, I welcome and encourage this kind of looking at the zoning code to see where it might be streamlined. Like, when do you really need the planning board or any of the boards to weigh in on some substantive decision? So I think you guys are heading in the right direction, and I look forward to helping Emily and any of the other staff in any way necessary. Because if we can get that time down a little bit, that would be fantastic.
Through the chair, I totally agree with everything you just said there. It takes a very long time to get a permit when one is required, and that increases the cost to build housing or start a new business. And there multiple departments are working together to try and figure out ways of streamlining our permitting while still getting the results we're looking for, so that it is easier to build housing and easier to start a business in Somerville.
Yeah, Luke has raised this a couple of different times. Look, the city is calling us with probably Artbeat. Um, Luke has raised this a couple of different times in meetings where he's like, "Wait, it's taken this long. Wait, that can't be right," et cetera, et cetera. When applicants who are not complaining, it's just kind of as an aside. And so I think as we understand more of you know, the process that the applicants are going through. Like Michael tonight was terrific. He's like, listen, we know they're on a time crunch, etc. How can we kind of move this forward in a way that absolutely doesn't shirk what we're trying to do, our activities at all, but rather, you know, strikes that balance. So you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago in Providence. So as it comes up, I just wanted to say officially, I think that's a really good idea.
Thank you.
I will just say I've worked in government for quite a while, and 562 days I would kill for that type of turnaround. It's the stuff we do. But no, Lynn, thank you very much. I think that's a valuable point too. Who else? What else? No one. Okay. So what we Luke, yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just so you have a sense of other voices. Yes, I appreciate what Lynn said, what you said, Mr. Chair. So I generally supportive of the amendment before us today and appreciate having this longer conversation too.
Me too. Me too. So with no kind of scanning the faces and anybody's putting up a Simpsons hand. With no further discussion on this particular item, as a reminder, it's only the red line changes that are on the shared screen right now. The chair moves to adopt the proposed changes to the rules and regs of the planning board, seconded by Amelia. Steve, can we have a roll call?
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Lynn Richards,
Aye.
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Amelia Abel,
Aye.
and Michael Capuano.
Aye. Okay. Well, those are all the items that we had on our agenda tonight.
Michael, can I take a couple of minutes and put something towards to the board? Do you mind?
Yeah, I think it depends on what it is in case it would have needed to be put on our agenda. I'm just making
Oh.
sure.
Oh, well, I wanted to understand better being new on the board. I wanted to understand better the Summer Nova project, which is going to be coming to us at some point in time in the future. I don't know when, in 6 months, in a year or something, but it's a really big project and everyone in Somerville seems to have a lot of opinions on it. And I checked with Dan to make sure that I could, you know, understand, like talk to people involved in it before it comes up. Good, Dan's nodding his head. I found it incredibly illustrative. It was about 2 hour tour, understood different parts of it, and I said to the person taking me around, it's like this would be great if every planning board member kind of walked through the project and understood it. And the person said, yes, absolutely, I'm happy to do it. And I was like, well, there's open meeting laws, so you could only do like one or two at a time. I find that when we go through our process, somebody presents and then it's a public meeting, you hear from the public, and then 2 weeks later we can chime in. So for me, I was able to kind of understand the big picture and ask, you know, no less than 4 dozen questions. Anywho, I found it really helpful and wanted to make that offer to other planning board folks. I'm happy to put you in touch with different folks if you wanted to get a tour of the proposed Summer Nova project, and you could see what's happening now. And it was just incredibly helpful to walk the project.
Yeah,
So
Lynn,
I don't know
I share that. I try. I don't always, you know, get to it, but especially for more comprehensive projects and developments and districts and things, I like to try to take a look around, take a walk around, take a drive through, take a walk through, and see really what it is that we're trying to do and trying to accomplish. My concern with raising some of this stuff now specifically is open meeting, right? So we don't have this on our agenda. We do have a quorum of the planning board. This is some sort of a development that may or may not come before us in a specific fashion. So I'm gonna hold off on any further discussion. But we can generally speak to, yes, if we have a nice project that's going forward, take a look. You know, we all live here.
That was all I wanted to say.
Dan, did you want to address anything?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, two things is we could also provide the board a next steps kind of overview presentation, because there is a bunch of next steps that are definitely going to unfold, and eventually a master plan is going to come in front of you, and then eventually site plan approval applications for their buildings and civic spaces. Like you all just highlighted, in the meantime, as community members, you're able to engage, especially individually, with anybody that's a developer in the city, and learn more about what's going on. The key thing is to not have a quorum of you together doing anything like that, especially for something that is about to become a permit application in the future. So operating independently on your own is probably the best bet for that type of thing. But you can also request formal presentations from people at your hearings, and then you would avoid any kind of open meeting law problems also. So independent actions outside of a meeting, and then things on the agenda would probably be best. Yeah.
As all of you know, we definitely have asked staff and applicants for updates on plans and projects and things like that, that have taken a while, that are going to be significant, that are going to cause a lot of community engagement, and just to have an idea of what we are kind of facing down over the coming weeks and months. So to the extent that somebody is available in the next couple of weeks, Dan, to kind of give us that rundown, I would welcome that one, because I don't know of any other big developments like that that are kind of in the works. That's the one that's going on now. It's not Assembly Square, it's not Boynton Yard, it's not Winter Hill. So it's kind of a spot unto its own that we haven't done in a little bit. So
Mr. Chair?
yeah, maybe.
There was a point where for the Winter Hill Star Market development, staff had developed like a Gantt chart of anticipated touch points that tied into the developer's conceptual phasing for the project. And I don't want to suggest that we need something that's that detailed, but I do wonder whether either staff or the applicant might be able to put together, some kind of timeline suggesting in what order we should expect to see things and what the various approval steps we'll have are, because I think especially with the development of this scale with this many moving pieces, something like that was a very useful tool at the time. So not to create busy work for anyone, but especially if that's something the developer could be prepared to present. I think that might be useful to folks.
Right. Anybody else before we think about moving along to a couple of weeks from now? Seeing no further items of discussion, with nothing else on our agenda at 7:11 p.m. Chair moves to adjourn, seconded by Amelia. Steve, can I have a roll call, please?
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Lynn Richards,
Aye.
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Amelia Aboff,
Aye.
and Michael Capuano.
Aye. See you all in August.
Everybody.
Thanks.
You.